Open Xcode, and you'll see this screen, and we're going to create a new Xcode project. We're going to make this a single view application. It'll be simple. Make sure it's an iOS application. Click single view. Click next. I'm going to name it Deciminute. And the right thing to do is to have an organization name and a unique identifier. You can use FHU, you could use something else, but it's basically this bundle identifier has to be unique. And you can make sure it's unique by connecting it to your unique domain name, which you already have. You are not Freed-Hardeman, so you may not want to use this, but it should be unique. I'm going to use Swift. I'm going to make it a universal app. That means it would work on iPad or iPhone. I'm going to say next. And I will save this somewhere. And just for fun, I will go ahead and click Create Git Repository on my Mac for this, because why not have a Git repo, just in case, even though we probably won't ever really use it. Right, so this is the home screen where we can see some of the settings for our project. First thing I'm going to do is delete this view controller that I got, because I really don't want that. I want to have better named stuff. I'm going to go ahead and move it to the trash, not just remove it from Xcode. Everything we're going to do is going to be on one view controller. If you've watched the other videos, you know that iOS is very much organized around the MVC architecture. M is the model, that's the data. V is the view, that's the user interface stuff that the user sees. And the C, the controller, is the thing that connects the model to the view. So we're going to create a new view controller by saying File. Actually, let me make sure. I'm going to click on my Deciminute folder, because that's where I want my new view controller to go. I'm going to say New, File. And then I'm going to make sure I'm under iOS, Source, and I want a Cocoa Touch class. I'm going to say Next. Notice that if UI View Controller is selected in this subclass menu, it'll give you a name that ends in View Controller. This is the convention. You should always follow conventions in iOS and other languages too. I'm going to call this the Deciminute View Controller. Make sure it's a subclass of UI View Controller. I'm not going to create a zib, and it is going to be in Swift. So this is the way that we create a new view controller in Xcode. It's going to say, where do you want to put this? This is where I'll put it in the Deciminute folder, which is inside the other Deciminute folder. So I'll create that, and notice I should have this file here. It's opened it up for me. It's given me some of the built-in functionality, the built-in functions. They're not implemented, but they're here that they're overridden. This is the function that happens when the view controller loads. This is what happens if the view controller gets a memory warning. For now, I'm going to assume that never happens, so I'm going to delete that. Likewise, there's some commented out code here that would be handled if you segued. Let's see, you're segueing from this controller. We're not going to mess with this either, so I'm going to delete that. Just have a really clean view controller. One more thing that I want to do while I'm thinking about it. In order to connect this view controller to the view, I'm going to look at the view, which is in main.storyboard. This is a graphical representation of my app. You notice I have this one view here. If I click on it and look at these properties over here, click on this one, the third one, the identity inspector. I'm going to click on the view controller, and then make sure the view controller is selected. And I'm saying that this view controller is connected to a custom class, which is the Deciminute view controller. So it's essential that I do this so that this view knows that it's going to be running the code that's in the Deciminute view controller. If you don't do this, then nothing will happen. The code that you wrote, even if it's perfect, won't execute because this view isn't an instance of this special custom class that we're going to write. So make sure you do this. I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to come back over here and look at my Deciminute view controller. Actually, let's start with the view first. Let's design our view, and then we'll connect it up and make the logic work. So back to the main storyboard. Sorry about that. I'll try to get some space here. You see our pretty simple layout. We're going to have a label at the top. You can scroll through this library down here, or you can type in label to find the label element. And I'm going to click and drag it onto the view controller. I'm going to follow these layout guides to generally place it correctly. I'm going to double click on the label and type in, is it a Deciminute? Question mark. And then I'm going to re-center that. Now, one of the things that we're going to have to do in this class a lot that I told you is going to probably be a headache for you is called auto layout, and it's rules. It's a visual language where you set constraints on objects to determine where they go in a dynamically sized device. So we don't know what device width and height this app is going to be seeing on it. It could be a 4-inch iPhone or a 4.7-inch iPhone or a 6-inch, a big iPhone. Any of them, iPhone 6 or 5 or 4 or whatever. Let me go ahead and put everything in first, and then we'll work with auto layout. So after that kind of title, I want a button. I'm going to drag over this button and put it underneath of it.
Is there any shortcut keys for centering so you don't have to drag it like that?
No. It's more complicated than that, I think. Not that I know of. I'm going to put my button under there. I'm going to put a label at the bottom, which will be the, this is the time. So I'm just going to type in a sample time so we can see what it looks like. So it's 3:24:45 seconds. And lastly, put a label in the middle that says yes or no. I said tip, get a mouse. Okay, so what do we do next? We've got these things here. Let's run the app by clicking the play button. When we click play, it's going to run this on the iPhone 6 simulator. It's probably going to look bad. We'll see. Kind of bad. It looks bad because we haven't specified the auto layout constraints. We can at least see everything. No, that's nice. So let's try to fix these things. Actually, let's not. I do not want to spend the rest of the class doing that. Let's get the code working, and then let's fix auto layout. Okay. This is tricky, but cool. So make sure that you have this view controller selected on the storyboard, and click these two circle buttons. It's called the Assistant Editor. When you do this, let me close this. What it's going to do is it's going to show you the storyboard on the left and an associated file on the right. By default, it'll show automatic, and there's this view controller is the one that correlates with it because this is a custom class of the Deciminute view controller. Okay, in order to deal with this stuff, in order to program with these controls that are on this storyboard, we have to have a reference to them. We have to have a connection to say this is the label, and we're going to do that by adding what are called outlets from the view controller to the storyboard. So the outlets that we need is, we need one to this yes button. I'm going to get that by clicking on the yes button, clicking control, and dragging to the code. Which is kind of weird. I was blown away when I first heard that you could do this because I did it a harder way. So you're control dragging from a label on the storyboard to your view controller. I'm going to let go, and when I do, this pops up. I do want an outlet. I'm going to name this thing well. I'm going to call this the result label. Result label, lowercase result. This is going to be an instance or a property on our class, and properties by convention should have a lowercase. I'm going to press enter, and it's going to do a bunch of stuff here to make this thing. This is saying that this is a variable, result label. It's of type UI label. It's optional. But notice over here it's an IB outlet. That means that it can be, it's connected to something that's on Interface Builder. That's what the storyboard kind of view used to be called, and it still is inside Xcode. So I've got an IB outlet for that. I also need an IB outlet for the time, and I'm going to call this the time label. Notice too that there's this little box, circle. If it's filled in, that means it's connected to a control that's on the storyboard. If it's not filled in, then it hasn't been connected yet. Notice it automatically highlights. That's pretty cool. The last thing I have to do is I need to run a function when you click the button. How do I do that? It's in a similar way. I'm going to control drag from this button and drop it over here. Now I don't want an outlet to that button. I'm not going to need to program with that button. I just need to do something when the button is pressed. So I'm going to change this connection from outlet to action. So I'm defining an action here. The action I want to write is something called, I don't know, button tapped. It's not a super descriptive name. Get answer? Yeah, I don't love that either. Yeah,
Do something.
not do something. I am going to change this, even though this doesn't matter for us, to UI button from any object. We don't deal with any object if you can help it. The event is a touch up inside. That's what we want for normal buttons. That means that you press down and then you untouched, you pulled your finger up while your finger was still in the button. If you press down and then moved your finger over and then pulled up, that wouldn't be touch up inside. I'm going to say connect, and what this is going to do is it's going to write the beginnings of a function that is an IB action. So this is the name. It takes in one argument called sender that's of type UI button. This is the button that was pressed that caused this event to happen. It's a function, and it's annotated with this IB action to say this is an action that's caused from an interface builder event. Okay. Feeling good? You liking this? Solid. It's solid. All right, we can do this. What do we need to do when this button is pressed? Well, we need to get the current time, and we need to say, we need to get the seconds from the current time and see if the number of seconds is divisible by 6. Right. This is a little goofy. I'll give you this, all right? This is like not the smoothest way of dealing with components of a date, I don't think. But this is the iOS way of doing it. Let's go. All right, first, we're going to create a constant called now. It doesn't need to be a variable because we're not going to change it, so let's make it a constant. So we're going to say let now equals, and I'm going to create a new NSDate. So I'm going to create a new NSDate object. It'll be instantiated with the current date and time. The next thing is I have to get a reference to a calendar. So I'm going to say let calendar equals NSCalendar dot current calendar. Good question. All of this framework traces its roots back to an old operating system called Next Step. That was a precursor to the Mac OS X. So NS stands for Next Step. And they're all named this way, and even though that operating system wasn't a commercial success, it's the name of everything. Okay. You'll notice all this stuff has this kind of weirdly named, this weird name convention where the first 2 letters are kind of an abbreviation for the framework. And we'll see that in other ways later. All right, the next thing we have to do is we have to get the components of the date. And to do that, we're going to say let components, create another constant, and this components constant is going to be equal to the calendar object dot components. And what we're going to do here is we're going to pass in a special like flag, which is actually a bit field that has all of the components that we want and the date that we want to extract those components from. And we're going to actually like bitwise OR them together. So this is how you do that. We want the dot calendar unit minute. So this dot calendar unit is actually a value that's in an enum. We're going to bitwise OR it with a single bar. Dot calendar unit second. Actually, we don't even need the minute.
Well, if we're going to display it, we need it.
We might need it if we're going to display it. If we were going to display it, then we'd actually need the dot calendar unit hour as well. Okay, so we're saying I want the calendar, the hour, minute, and second from the components of this date. The from date, notice we've got this named keyword, this name parameter, is going to be now. So now a component should have those three components in it that is populated. And just to make it a little easier to deal with, I'm going to say let second equal components dot second. Oh, I've made a mistake. This should be calendar.components, not component. And now this works. Okay, now this is easy. I can say if second mod 6 equals 0. So if it is a deciminute, then I want to do what I want to do, which is I want to say self dot, what do I call that thing? Result label dot text equals yes.
Do you need to do self or that?
You don't have to do self. I just always like to remind myself that I'm dealing with a property of this class. I'm messing with, I'm modifying an instance variable, not a local variable, but an instance variable. So we could just as easily say result label dot text equals no, and both of those will work. I don't know, there's just something to me that's nice. They're exactly the same. I just also, if you type self dot, you get auto completion. Well, you might get it anyway. But that's me. Okay. And then the last thing we might want to do, we're going to say we do want to do, is to update this label at the bottom. So I'm going to say self dot time label dot text. So the text property on this time label is equal to, and let's use our spiffy syntax here to say backslash parentheses for the hours. So we can say components dot hour, which is an int. Wait, sorry, components dot hour colon slash parentheses components dot minute colon backslash quotes components dot second, which we could use second. So this is going to manually get that hour, minute, second components, those three ints, out of the components object and put them into this piece at the bottom. Does that make sense? So that should be it if we did it right. There would be one little formatting issue that's ugly. I'm going to run that by doing Command R for run and running this simulator. So I'm going to click this button a lot of times. Oh, you can't see it. Let's see if we rotate sideways. Nope, can't see it. If we did it right, we ought to get a yes every 6 seconds or so, every deciminute. That's exciting, huh? you glad you came to class? Wait for it. Boom. Yes, it feels good. If you could see it, you would see that there's one odd thing about it, which is there's no leading zero in the minutes because we're just showing it as an int, and that's not normally the way we show time. So let me show you a cleaner way of doing that. Normally when you show time, you wouldn't manually compose it like this. I'm going to comment this out and do it a kind of cleaner way, but more lines of code. You'd use a class called the NSDate formatter, and with the NSDate formatter, you can say, using some special codes, like little h means hours, and they're in a certain format. Lots of these strings, kind of like if you've seen a date formatting maybe in printfs in C++. Anyway, here's what we're going to do. We're going to say let date formatter equal an NSDate formatter object. And we're going to specify that the date formatter dot date format, this is going to be the special string, which if you didn't have me up here, you would look it up and say, hey, remind me again, what are all the special codes? Or maybe you just remember it. And we want little h colon little m colon ss for hour, minute, second. You see what's going on there. These have to be special strings, though, special characters. You can't just make these up unless you get lucky. Okay, so this says that this is how I want the date formatter to convert date objects into a string. So I'm going to say let date string equal the date formatter dot, there's a method called string from date. So it returns a string when you pass in a date object. So I'm going to pass in the now. And then I can say self.timelabel.text equals the date string. And just so that we can confirm that we're seeing it, we're going to have to do a little auto layout. Let me just do it on here. I'm going to control drag on the storyboard from this thing to the view that contains it. This whole view that contains it should light up. And I'm going to say leading space to container margin. And I'm also going to click and drag and say bottom space to bottom layout guide. So control dragging on this, I'm putting in some these constraints that say lock this in to certain sides or bottom. Actually, let's see what it did. So I'm going to click this button so I can see it. I'm going to exit the this assistant editor to go here, and then click on this button. No, this one. Sorry, the little ruler. I've selected my time label. Notice it set the leading space to 255 points. That's not what I want. I'm just going to set this equal to the standard value, so it'll just be kind of hugging the left side, so we can see it. I'm going to set it to 0, and the bottom, so it's 20 spaces off the bottom. That'll be okay. I'm going to save that and run it. Hopefully now at least we can see that time label completely. That's where we want it. So I'm going to click this. Notice I did get the leading 0 before the 3 also, which may not be what we want. Boom. So there's a lot that could be done to clean up this layout. For example, I would really like these top two things to be centered, let's imagine. I'm going to stop my simulator. So I'm going to click on the storyboard, click on the thing I want to be centered, and I'm going to control drag from it to the view. This comes up, you see there's a center horizontally in container. That's what I want it to do. When you do this, when you start getting red and yellow lines, that's bad. But it's okay, we can fix it. It means, the yellow lines mean you're controls are not where they should be according to what the constraints say. If you want to see where they should be, you can come down here and click this button and say Update Frames, and then it'll move everything to where it should be according to the constraints. Ugh. Terrible. Terrible. All right, so now we have to fix everything. So this is how we're going to fix it. We're going to center this horizontally. And we're going to make sure that we're going to control drag from this button to the Is it a Deciminute label. And I'm going to add vertical spacing to make this be a little below this. And I'm going to center, I'm going to center this yes label as well. I can't get a hold of it, so I'm going to click it over here. I'm going to make it bigger so that I can touch it. Okay. And let me fix this. I want to center it. I really want this to be a bigger font size too. And I don't want it to be black. Let's make it red. Red is bold. All right, so I want this to be centered horizontally and vertically in the container. I'm going to click Command, and then I can click both of them without the black box going away. And this red symbol here means that there are auto layout issues. I'm going to click on them. It says I'm missing some constraints. And this is dangerous. You can say add missing constraint, and Xcode will add what it thinks it should add. That might fix it. I doubt it. Let me do it myself. So I'm gonna, on this top one, is it a deciminute? Which is really hard to get a hold of. I'll show you over here. I'm going to control drag from this to the view. I need not just to center this horizontally, but it needs to know that it needs to be off of the top. It needs to have some top space to top layout guide. So that gives it knows where to start. It knows to be below the top layout guide. It looks like now all I have is warnings. Misplaced views, that just means something's different than the way it's going to be laid out, but it's okay. So if we did this right, as when we run it, it should look how we want it. All right, we'll look at this. They did something wrong with that top label, and it's not pushing off the top layout guide. This still is going to work. It's just laid out wrong. So let's see what we did. I'm going to click on this. This is what's messed up. Click on the ruler. Bottom space to top layout guide. If you double click on this, you get even more information about this constraint. So this says that the first item is the top layout guide dot top. So that's the top of it, and it's equal to the bottom of this label. It's actually not even equal. It's a -1. That's not what I want. I want the bottom of the top layout guide to be related to the top of this is it a deciminute, and I would like this to not be -1, but let me use the standard value. I don't know what that is. I think it may be 8 or 16. Do you know? Oh, it just depends on the context. Okay. If you can use the standard value, I think that's a fine way to do it. It's pretty tight. We may need to be more than standard value. You see how close it is to the status bar up here. This is a little better. Notice by doing this, even when I rotate it, you can rotate by going to the hardware menu and pressing Command left and right, or pressing Command left and right. Notice by doing that, when I rotate it into this format, it at least is still mostly readable. This sticks in the bottom left, and this is still in the center. This is centered. It's still too close to the top. What questions do you have about deciminute?
Is it a deciminute? Is it a deciminute?
That was a little longer than a deciminute to make this, but we did make a whole app. Now let's break this down. Let's think about what the MVC is of this app. The M is a date, basically. Our only model is that now NSDate object. It's a simple model, which is nice. It makes the whole thing simpler, right? Simple model. The view is what we're looking at right now. what's on the storyboard, all this auto layout stuff, these controls. This is the view. That's the V. And the C is where we put our code. The C is where we're going to spend probably most of our time, and that's in the Deciminute view controller, where we're connecting the model to the view. Questions on this? All right, well, this will be launched on the App Store really soon. It'll be 99 cents. And we're hoping to get a lot of, there'll be a free version as well that's ad supported. But just to help you keep track of your deciminutes.